At a family dinner meant to bring us all together, they laughed, mocked my career choices, and called me a failure right to my face, completely unaware that I had just closed a major deal and my company was now worth 7 figures. So I quietly slid my business card across the table, and watched their smiles fade. Still residing in that small apartment they scoffed at during the family dinner, I simply smiled and stated, "I am the chief executive who just acquired your corporation." The entire table fell silent. Thank you for being here with me today. I hope you are experiencing a wonderful day wherever you might be. I would truly appreciate it if you could share in the comments which city or nation you are viewing from, and what time it is there currently. Now, let us commence our narrative. The atmosphere in my compact downtown dwelling always carried a faint aroma of roasted coffee and the sharp, clean scent emanating from my server equipment, a fragrance I found comforting. It was unequivocally mine. Every item within it, the well-used leather armchair, the desk cluttered with circuit schematics and chilled coffee containers, the solitary artwork I had purchased with my initial significant bonus, felt genuinely earned. It represented a distinct world, far removed from the polished, impersonal splendor of my parents' residence. The journey there each Sunday was a descent into a familiar kind of apprehension. A knot in my stomach would begin to form around the city limits, growing heavier with every mile until I turned onto their tree-lined thoroughfare. The houses here were more than just dwellings. They were declarations, grand and imposing structures situated far back on vast expanses of meticulously maintained greenery. And the most magnificent, the most imposing, was my parents' colonial-style home. It stood like a monument to a particular, inflexible definition of accomplishment, one I had deliberately chosen to reject. Stepping from my vehicle, the gravel crunched beneath my shoes, a sound that always seemed excessively loud, announcing my presence. The exterior of the house was immaculate, the window panes gleaming, the porch furnishings arranged with military precision. It was indeed beautiful, yet it lacked any genuine character. It felt less like a place where life unfolded organically and more like a theatrical backdrop. The substantial oak entrance door swung open before I even reached it. My mother, Eleanor, stood there, flawlessly attired, a polite smile fixed on her face that did not quite extend to her eyes. "Michael, you are punctual." Her tone was approving, a minor point in my favor before the inevitable critiques commenced. My father, Robert, was positioned behind her, a glass of whiskey in hand, offering a nod that was more a recognition than a genuine greeting. James and Sarah were already seated in the living area, a fire crackling in the hearth purely for aesthetic purposes, as the house maintained a consistent, regulated temperature. James, my elder brother by 2 years, embodied my parents' aspirations. He had followed the conventional, successful route, engineering from a prestigious academic institution, directly into my father's manufacturing enterprise, a swift ascent through the hierarchy, a marriage to Sarah, who originated from a lineage with the appropriate connections, and a relocation to an even larger residence in an even more exclusive suburban area than this one. He was the archetype, the offspring who had executed every step correctly, the one presented as the shining example. He wore the status like a custom-fitted garment, comfortable and self-assured. And then there was me. My trajectory diverged sharply after completing my engineering degree. The anticipated next move was my father's firm, but I harbored a different vision, one that encompassed programming, data streams, and the invisible protection of cybersecurity. It was a risk, a plunge into the uncharted territory of technology startups. 7 years I had dedicated to cyphertech, 7 years of working 18-hour days, living frugally, reinvesting every dollar, confronting overwhelming uncertainty, and celebrating exhilarating minor triumphs. My workspace was merely a corner of my small downtown apartment. It was chaotic, all-consuming, and exhilaratingly my own. This vocational choice was a perpetual source of confusion and disappointment for my parents. They failed to comprehend the industry, the underlying technology, or its inherent potential. To them, it lacked substance, predictability. It wasn't a legitimate profession like James's. It was merely tinkering on computers, a phase I was taking far too long to outgrow. James, with his effortless self-confidence in the world they understood, never hesitated to exacerbate the situation. "Still writing code in your sleepwear, Mikey?" he quipped, loud enough for everyone to overhear. Their dismissal of my career choice cut deeply, intensified by a past event that still caused pain. When my father's company faced near collapse a decade ago, burdened by debt from an ill-timed expansion, my parents were desperate. The college fund I had worked part-time jobs to augment was gone, consumed by loans. They were on the verge of losing the grand house, their emblem of everything. I was fresh out of university with promising offers, but I witnessed their panic. I accepted a corporate engineering position I found profoundly unfulfilling and spent the subsequent 2 years channeling almost every penny of my earnings to them. I lived like a student, shared an inexpensive house with housemates, and drove a dilapidated vehicle. They pledged to support my future endeavors once they were financially stable again, perhaps even invest if I wished to initiate something. It wasn't a formal agreement, merely familial promises uttered during a crisis, promises that evaporated the moment the immediate threat subsided. When I later informed them I was utilizing the modest savings I had managed to accumulate to launch Cyphertech, rather than for a down payment on a home they deemed appropriate, their disappointment was palpable. "A startup, Michael? That's incredibly irresponsible. What about stability?" my mother had exclaimed, her voice tinged with alarm and disapproval. "James found a secure path, why can't you?" My contribution during their crisis was reinterpreted, minimized to, "Michael merely assisted a little," while James's decision to join the company was elevated to an act of profound loyalty and foresight. It felt as though my personal history, my sacrifices, were being actively edited out of the family narrative to conform to the preferred storyline where James was the sole responsible, accomplished individual. This quiet obliteration, the unacknowledged sacrifice, established a foundation of resentment, and rendered their ongoing dismissal of my actual achievements all the more painful. But tonight was the crucial moment. Tomorrow morning, Cyphertech would officially announce its successful Series B funding round, a staggering $50 million investment that validated everything I had invested into the company. And simultaneously, the announcement would go live. Cyphertech was acquiring Sterling Industries. It had been a complex, arduous negotiation and due diligence process. My father's company was in a far worse state than they had let on, inefficient, outdated, and frankly, mismanaged to the brink of insolvency. The acquisition was not merely a strategic maneuver, it was a lifeline for a company with a strong client base being driven into the ground. For Cyphertech, it was a strategic expansion. For them, it was rescue disguised as defeat. I had spent the last week oscillating between sickening dread and simmering anticipation. I knew the acquisition would be a shock, a profound blow to their meticulously constructed world. And this dinner tonight, it was the final opportunity for their customary brand of dismissal before the truth descended like a bombshell. I entered the living room, the aroma of polished furniture filling my lungs, feeling like an actor stepping onto a stage I knew intimately but despised. "Michael, please, you could make it," my father stated, his voice neutral, already adopting his family patriarch persona. My mother offered that same tight, inscrutable smile. James gave me a dismissive once-over. "Hey, didn't get lost, did you? It's quite a distance from downtown." Sarah offered a small, genuine smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, a silent apology for her husband's conduct. I accepted the sparkling water my mother offered, a small, quiet act of defiance against the expectation of joining them for a pre-dinner whiskey or wine. The conversation revolved, as always, around James's sphere, his latest initiative at the firm, the upcoming school fundraiser Sarah was organizing, the sheer rationality and stability of their life decisions. They spoke about the family enterprise in hushed, concerned tones, hinting at market challenges and difficult choices, carefully omitting the true extent of the financial distress. My contribution to the discussion was minimal. I answered questions vaguely, deflected comparisons, attempting to minimize my presence until the meal concluded. It was a defense mechanism honed over years. Make yourself insignificant, and perhaps the judgment won't sting as much. We transitioned to the dining room. The table was a bastion of fine linen, crystal, and gleaming silverware. The centerpiece was an elaborate floral arrangement that seemed almost too perfect, too delicate. My seat was, as usual, at the end of the table, slightly set apart, a physical representation of my position within the family hierarchy. The roast was served, the potatoes and asparagus passed around. The sounds of polite eating filled the initial silence, punctuated by my mother's comments about the cuisine or the ambience. Then the conversation inevitably reverted to the family firm, and the focus shifted, settling on me. My father sighed, setting down his fork. "Michael," he began, his voice heavy with feigned concern. "We worry about you. You're 32. It's time for you to become serious, settle down. That startup, it's just not sustainable." My mother added, her voice soft but edged with disappointment. "Your brother has constructed such a stable existence, Michael, a beautiful home, a family, roots. That tiny apartment of yours, it's just so temporary." James, sensing the familiar ritual, leaned forward, his eyes glinting with malicious amusement. "Yeah, Mikey, when are you going to join the real world? Be honest, how much are you actually earning? Enough to subsist on, or just playing around?" He paused, then delivered the remark designed to completely invalidate me. "Look, I could speak to Dad, see if there's an entry-level position at the firm. It might be a step down, but it would provide you with some security, something substantial to do with that engineering degree." The condescension in his voice, the casual dismissal of years of my relentless effort and significant, quiet achievements, struck me with the force of a physical blow. My throat tightened, my hands resting on my lap, began to tremble. This was it, the culmination of every slight, every dismissive comment, every instance they had held James up as the benchmark and found me lacking. The memory of my unacknowledged sacrifice burned in my mind. They hadn't valued my assistance then, and they didn't value my diligent work now. They only valued adherence to their narrow perspective. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. The immaculate table setting, the expensive food, the aura of effortless achievement, it all felt like a deception, a facade built on dismissal and denial. The familiar knot in my stomach twisted violently. For a fleeting second, the old impulse to shrink, to deflect, to vanish resurfaced. But then a wave of pure, cold clarity washed over me, not rage, not sorrow, but a profound, quiet certainty. This was the moment I ceased to be their perceived failure. My mother's voice cut through my thoughts, softer this time, almost sympathetic. "Still residing in that apartment, Michael?" I met her gaze, then my father's, then James's, whose smug expression remained unwavering. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs not with dread, but with calm determination. I felt my trembling cease. My hands rested steadily on the table now. I smiled a slow, deliberate smile that did not reach my eyes. It was a smile of understanding, a smile that felt potent and terrifying all at once. My voice was quiet, measured, but it cut through the polite silence of the table like a precise beam. "Yes, Mom," I said softly. "I am still living in that apartment." I paused, allowing the words to linger, letting them assume their dismissal had landed. Then I delivered the sentence that would shatter their reality. "And I am the chief executive who just acquired your corporation." The impact was immediate and absolute. The silence was instantaneous, thick, deafening. It was the sound of a world halting. Forks clattered against china plates with startling loudness. My father's face, usually a picture of robust confidence, went slack, draining of color until he was ashen. My mother gasped, a sharp, bird-like sound, and her hand flew to her chest. James's smug smirk evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock, his eyes wide and disbelieving. Sarah simply stared frozen, her fork halfway to her mouth. What did you say?" my father stammered, his voice barely audible. I repeated it, my voice gaining strength now, clear and steady. "Cyphertech, my company. We successfully concluded a $50 million Series B funding round this week. And as of tomorrow morning, Cyphertech officially owns Sterling Industries. We acquired it." "That's impossible!" James roared, leaping halfway out of his chair, his face contorted with fury and disbelief. Your tiny little startup bought Dad's company? You're lying! It's not tiny, James. I corrected him, holding his furious gaze. We've been expanding exponentially. And yes, we're acquiring the company. Your company was failing rapidly, more than you ever let on at these dinners. My father found his voice, rising in pitch, tinged with panic. Failing? What are you discussing? Face challenges, yes, but bankruptcy? Acquisition? I didn't authorize this. The board did, Dad, I stated factually. They recognized the inevitable. Our offer preserves the company, its jobs, its legacy, from complete collapse. It was a strategic acquisition for Cyphertech, but make no mistake, it's a rescue for Sterling Industries. My mother's dramatic sobbing commenced again, louder this time. How could you, Michael? Your own family. Your father worked his whole life. Family? I echoed again, the words still tasting like ash. You wish to discuss family? While I was pouring my life into constructing something real, enduring your constant dismissal, you were calling me a failure. James was offering me charity positions. Is that family? Was it family when you dismissed my sacrifice years ago as if it were nothing? The pain of that unacknowledged act fueled my words, quiet but sharp. James slammed his fist on the table again. You did this intentionally. You waited until we were vulnerable. I didn't cause the vulnerability, James, I said, my gaze unwavering. Your management did. Or perhaps your mismanagement. And here I delivered the blow that penetrated deeper than financial loss, exposing the true decay beneath their opulent surface. Actually, I said, my voice dropping slightly, compelling them to lean in, their faces a mask of fear and fury. During due diligence, my acquisition team discovered some interesting elements in the financial records. Creative accounting practices. It appears very much like you and Dad weren't just poor at operating the company. You were actively concealing losses, perhaps even misrepresenting financial data to hide the extent of the problem from investors, even the bank, maintaining appearances at all costs. The air completely left the room this time. Their faces, already pale, went slack with genuine terror. This wasn't merely about losing their company. This was about potential legal ramifications. My calm tone, the factual nature of my statements, made it clear this wasn't speculation. I possessed the proof. This was the true moment of accountability, exposing not just their arrogance and dismissal, but their fundamental dishonesty. That's a malicious falsehood, my father croaked, but his eyes darted wildly, confirming everything. Is it? I challenged softly. My legal team is quite thorough. We possess the documentation. The acquisition agreement includes provisions related to liabilities uncovered during due diligence. Let's just say gaining control of the company records was very important to us. The implication hung heavily in the air. I had the evidence, and their destiny, perhaps legally, rested on my discretion. The beautiful dining room felt like a crypt. The perfect roast sat untouched. The conversation was over, replaced by a silent tableau of shock, fear, and sputtering rage. I'm finished, I said, pushing back my chair. I've articulated what needed to be said. The transaction is finalized. The company is mine. We will manage the transition through the appropriate channels. Legal representatives will be in contact. I rose and walked away from the table, leaving the devastation behind me. Their stunned silence persisted until I reached the foyer. Then I heard the initial sounds of panicked, angry voices rising behind me. I did not look back. I walked past the photographs on the wall, snapshots of a family I never fully felt a part of, celebrating achievements that felt hollow now. I opened the heavy front door and stepped outside. The cool night air felt like a balm on my skin. I stood on the porch for a moment, the scent of freshly cut grass filling my lungs, breathing deeply. The grand house loomed behind me, no longer a symbol of unattainable success but a monument to a pretense I had finally dismantled. Getting into my car felt like entering my own sanctuary, a place of security and authenticity. Driving away, watching the mansion diminish in my rearview mirror, the usual knot of dread was replaced by an overwhelming, exhausting sense of liberation, tinged with a deep, aching sorrow. When I returned to my apartment, the quiet embrace of my own space was a comfort. The phone began ringing almost immediately. Messages and electronic mail poured in. The communications followed a predictable pattern of anger, threats, insults, and then desperate, manipulative pleas. James's messages were brief, sharp, filled with venom. My father's email was blustering, full of empty legal threats and demands. My mother's were laced with guilt-tripping and emotional manipulation. "How could you do this to your family, Michael? Your poor father is devastated. Family is everything. Don't abandon us." Reading them twisted the knife of past hurts, but they also highlighted the toxicity I had just escaped. I knew engaging would pull me back into their cycle. With a deep breath, I composed one simple, factual message and copied it to all of them. "The acquisition is final. Your conduct tonight confirms my decision. Future communication will be through legal counsel regarding the transition." Then, with a sense of finality that was both burdensome and liberating, I blocked their numbers and configured a filter to direct their emails straight to a separate folder I would not check daily. Establishing boundaries felt harsh but essential. It was an act of self-preservation, the initial step in claiming my own space, both mentally and emotionally. The next morning, the news became public. My phone buzzed with notifications. Headlines splashed across financial news websites. Cyphertech announces $50 million funding, acquires Sterling Industries. Business journals published articles detailing the acquisition, emphasizing Cyphertech's rapid expansion and innovation, and delicately mentioning Sterling Industries' recent operational difficulties. It was undeniable, public validation for years of tireless work and unwavering belief. The reactions from the outside world were in stark contrast to the internal family implosion. My friends, the true support system I had cultivated over the years, were ecstatic. Messages and calls flooded in, filled with genuine pride and congratulations. "Dude, you achieved it! I always knew you would!" My lawyer, Sarah, a woman who had witnessed the grim reality